What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright. So, we are now looking into Deuteronomy chapter 7. Previous chapters were, Moses, really the whole book of Deuteronomy, I think, is pretty much just Moses talking to the younger generation of Israelites, or newer, whatever, however you want to word that, before they go into the promised land, giving them some final words of advice, wisdom, encouragement, that kind of stuff. The last couple of chapters in particular are focused on just commitment to God and his commands. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's going to be more of that as we go along, but we'll just have to wait and see. So, anyway, yeah, here we go. Deuteronomy chapter 7. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are about to enter and occupy, he will clear away many nations ahead of you: the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. These 7 nations are greater and more numerous than you. When the Lord your God hands these nations over to you, and you conquer them, you must completely destroy them. Make no treaties with them, and show them no mercy. You must not intermarry with them. Do not let your daughters and sons marry their sons and daughters, for they will lead your children away from me to worship other gods. Then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and he will quickly destroy you. This is what you must do. You must break down their pagan altars and shatter their sacred pillars. Cut down their Asherah poles and burn their idols. For you are a holy people who belong to the Lord your God. Of all the people on earth, the Lord your God has chosen you to be his own special treasure. Pause there. So, footnote at destroy is probably the same thing about consecrating, which still generally probably means destroying, but there's a slight chance it meant giving something as an offering instead. But I don't think they would have been, offering other people as sacrifices, because God has made it clear that's not a thing that he likes. So, really leaning more towards the destruction. But a similar word might be used in other contexts to refer to non-human things, and in those contexts, it might be more of like the giving as an offering. But anyway. So, yeah. All these people groups, or at least some, these people groups in their large numbers and fortified cities and things like that are what scared off the older generation of Israelites from going into the promised land the first time they had an opportunity. But Moses is encouraging the people here, saying that, look, God is going to give these people over to you. Assuming you follow God, you will be able to conquer these people. But you have to get rid of them entirely, because otherwise they're going to lead you astray. Case in point, what happened with the Moabites and really also Midianite women when they seduced the men and kind of led them to worshiping other gods. No. God definitely don't like that. And things will not go well if and when that happens. It's probably more of a win, let's be honest. But, and part of the reason, of course, that they're not supposed to start worshiping these other gods is because, A, the Lord, Yahweh, is their God. He's the one who's done all these things for them and brought them this far. But also because they have been chosen as his people. So, like, starting to worship other gods doesn't exactly represent the Lord, Yahweh, very well. So, it doesn't necessarily say anything about, like, the cattle or, you know, other objects that are not people or idols or anything like that. But as far as any signs of, you know, worship to other gods, the Lord is like, nope, get rid of them, destroy them, make sure that you do not interact with them, and keep them for the long term, because you will eventually, much like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, you will be tempted to fall away. And eventually you will give in to that temptation, if you keep these things around. Anyway, then we get to verse 7. The Lord did not set his heart on you and choose you because you were more numerous than other nations, for you were the smallest of all nations. Rather, it was simply that the Lord loves you, and he was keeping the oath he had sworn to your ancestors. That is why the Lord rescued you with such a strong hand from your slavery and from the oppressive hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Understand, therefore, that the Lord your God is indeed God. He is the faithful God who keeps his covenant for 1,000 generations and lavishes his unfailing love on those who love him and obey his commands. But he does not hesitate to punish and destroy those who reject him. Therefore, you must obey all these commands, decrees, and regulations I am giving you today. It's, kind of repeating stuff that was said before, like, don't worship other gods, but it's also, well, even more specifically, just like, don't just turn away from God either, at all. And saying that, like, you know, God didn't choose these people because they were, you know, numerous or mighty or for any particular, like, physical reason. It wasn't really even anything to do with them and, you know, what kind of people they are. It's more so just because of God's earlier promises to Abraham and other forefathers of these people. That's why they are God's chosen people, because of those previous covenant agreements. But yeah, it's not like anything in particular stood out about this people group that God's like, oh yeah, I want you because you're great. No particular stuff like that. It's just God's loyalty, plain and simple. So then verse 12. If you listen to these regulations and faithfully obey them, the Lord your God will keep his covenant of unfailing love with you, as he promised with an oath to your ancestors. He will love you and bless you, and he will give you many children. He will give fertility to your land and your animals. When you arrive in the land he swore to give your ancestors, you will have large harvests of grain, new wine, and olive oil, and great herds of cattle, sheep, and goats. You will be blessed above all the nations of the earth. None of your men or women will be childless, and all your livestock will bear young. And the Lord will protect you from all sickness. He will not let you suffer from the terrible diseases you knew in Egypt, but he will inflict them on all your enemies. So, again, more details on basically saying, all right, keep God's commands, it'll go well. If not, bad things. But more specifically getting into what some of God's blessings would be in this case. Like, abundant crops, livestock, really possessions in general, and maybe some mentions of things like this are where some pastors and churches get sort of the prosperity gospel, as it's called, idea from. But we read later on, especially in the New Testament, that no, just because you follow God doesn't mean that everything is going to be completely fine and you're going to get everything you ever wanted or anything like that. But in general, at least, you know, for these people in this time, God is saying, okay, if you follow me, or actually Moses is saying, if you follow God while you live in this land, then things will go well for you. You will have plenty. You won't need for anything. And yeah, generally trouble will not befall you, or at least not very much. But to what extent does that depend on their obedience to all the different laws that we've read through in previous books and chapters? I mean, that's kind of up for debate, because, I mean, possibly if they disobey any particular bit of that, then it's like, okay, it's minor disobedience, you get a minor consequence here, like, illness for you, because you didn't follow this, or, and that's probably kind of a mentality that, you know, that these people fell into at other points in history, which is why you have people like Pharisees in the New Testament who are like hyper-religious, not necessarily in their desire and pursuit of God himself, but specifically of the laws, and trying to follow those to the letter. But anyway, I think I've sort of digressed long enough on all that. So I'll move on to verse 16 here. You must destroy all the nations the Lord your God hands over to you. Show them no mercy, and do not worship their gods, or they will trap you. Perhaps you will think to yourselves, how can we ever conquer these nations that are so much more powerful than we are? But don't be afraid of them. Just remember what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all the land of Egypt. Remember the great terrors the Lord your God sent against them. You saw it all with your own eyes. And remember the miraculous signs and wonders, and the strong hand and powerful arm with which he brought you out of Egypt. The Lord your God will use the same power against all the people you fear. And the Lord your God will send terror to drive out the few survivors still hiding from you. Again, kind of repeating stuff that's already been said. Don't be afraid of the people that are already in the promised land. God's going to give you victory over them. But don't leave them be. Like, don't leave any sign of them or, you know, the other gods that they worship, because that's going to lead you astray. And again, the version of you being used, especially in the later couple of verses here, I feel like absolutely have to be taken as a collective, because I doubt every single one of the Israelites in this group was even born when they first left Egypt. Now, I mean, many of the men that would be like leaders of their, households, families, especially tribal leaders, they probably all would have been alive for that stuff, just possibly kind of young. But anyway, footnote at terror here. Often rendered the hornet. Meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. So, it's... I mean, I will emphasize that it says the meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. But it's possible, in a similar manner to the plagues that befell Egypt, that God was actually going to send hornets, or at least some form of similar plague-like thing to, follow the other peoples that they were about to conquer in the Promised Land, and maybe A, help drive them out, B, weaken their forces within the Promised Land, and C, maybe keep pursuing them, any that have just fled but still remain alive, so that they maybe don't come back, at least not soon. So then, verse 21. No, do not be afraid of those nations, for the Lord your God is among you, and he is a great and awesome God. The Lord your God will drive those nations out ahead of you little by little. You will not clear them away all at once, otherwise the wild animals would multiply too quickly for you. But the Lord your God will hand them over to you. He will throw them into complete confusion until they are destroyed. He will put their kings in your power, and you will erase their names from the face of the earth. No one will be able to stand against you, and you will destroy them all. You must burn their idols in fire, and you must not covet the silver or gold that covers them. You must not take it, or it will become a trap to you, for it is detestable to the Lord your God. Do not bring any detestable objects into your home, for then you will be destroyed just like them. You must utterly detest such things, for they are set apart for destruction. Okay, so this section with verses like 21 to 24 here seem to show all the more evidence that, like, whatever hornets or plague type thing might be referenced in verse 20 is, like, probably kind of already happening as this is being said to the people, but, like, that was part of, God's strategy for getting the current inhabitants out of the Promised Land, so that, his people can come in and, have a chance against their forces, or at least have a better, easier chance against their forces. Not that it necessarily needed to happen that way, but, although it was mentioned here, the reason why God would drive them out little by little, because otherwise the wild animals would multiply too quickly, and then those could become an issue. So, yeah. God's basically going to help drive all those people out, which will, of course, help give the Israelites victory. But once again, they must, destroy all the things belonging to the other people groups. Maybe not necessarily everything, but, anything that even so much as hints at other godlike beings that they're supposed to get rid of so that they don't fall away. Wouldn't be surprising at all if that kind of winds up being what trips them up later. They don't fully follow through on that, because, let's face it, the Israelites have been known to be a bit stubborn and or not so, like, steadfast in following God. But anyway, yeah, so I guess that does it for Deuteronomy chapter 7. Okay, so major themes, unsurprisingly, are don't be afraid of the people that you're about to fight, and make sure you keep following God's commands, because, like, God didn't choose you because you were a great nation or anything like that. He just chose you because of his faithfulness to your forefathers who were, you know, loyal to him. So if you stop being loyal to him, it might not go so well for you. So don't, like, fall away from worshiping God. Don't, like, start worshiping other gods or anything like that just because things are going easy or anything like that. Now, but yeah, that's kind of the TLDW version of things. So anyway, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description to get info on other social media pages and all that good stuff. And leave comments down below there with any thoughts you have. So that's it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video. But until then, stay cool, people.